Hello and good afternoon and welcome to Stage 6, which is brought to you by the IPA. I'm Paul Bainsfair, the Director General of the IPA, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce the next session. It's going to be led by Charles Fallon, talking about buying and selling your agency, which is a topic close to most advertising people's hearts. If not now, it will be at some point. So let's hear all about that. Charles.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Good afternoon, everybody. This is going to be quite a straightforward format. I'm not going to speak much, but I'm going to ask questions of our 5 entrepreneurs who have built and sold their businesses. None of them have yet retired to the beach, so you have an opportunity to ask them questions at the end as well. And they're all entrepreneurs in their own right, and some of them have now sort of become a bit corporate, and some of them have left the businesses they've set up and started new ventures as well. So rather than me allow them all to introduce themselves and tell them the whole story, I'm going to give a little bit of introduction and then ask them the first question. And then once we've done 4 questions, we'll then open it up to you guys to pose the questions you really want to ask. So I'm going to start with Andrew McGuinness, who's sitting in the middle. Andrew, joint founder of BT McGuinness Bunge, and sold his business to Chale Worldwide in 2008. And left B&B last year and is now chairman and founder of 7 Dials PR. So the first question goes to Andrew, which is, why did you decide to sell B&B?
We sold B&B pretty early, actually. We'd only been going for less than 4 years. We had a lot of kind of incoming inquiries all of a sudden from people who were interested in acquiring the business. And the deal we did was a peculiar deal in that we did a 7-year deal, a deal structured over 7 years to allow us to capitalise on the growth of the business. Why did we sell? We felt really that my partners and I were at slightly different life stages, and the idea of being able to carry on for 15, 20 years was never really going to work for us. So it was the right buyer at the right time for our business, and it was also theoretically going to allow us to expand the business internationally, which in the end didn't really materialise, and that would probably be something else we should cover. But what it was going to allow us to do was to take B&B to become a global agency brand, and that's what was so attractive about doing that deal at that time.
Thank you. Charles Watson, Group Chairman of Karma Communications, who invested alongside a private equity firm called Phoenix into the Karma Group back in 2011. But prior to that, Charles led the MBO of Financial Dynamics, which was sold to FTI in 2006. So Charles comes from a different perspective. He's now more of an investor, having obviously done his own venture as well. So for you, Charles, what's the thought behind selling a business?
Well, I suppose I have a slightly schizophrenic role here, because I've sold businesses. I've sold businesses 3 times. I'm now more buying businesses. But I think whenever you're looking at it from the perspective of an investor, I think from a vendor, of course, you're looking to take money off the table. I mean, anyone who's built a successful business has probably worked unbelievably hard over a number of years, and the idea of de-risking your personal assets and taking some money off is absolutely valid. But I think what a buyer is looking for is what actually you're going to then go and do with the business. I mean, what is the plan to take it forward? I mean, I think if all you are doing, if you're looking at a business and all you can see is somebody wanting to sell out so they can effectively leave and retire, basically the value of the business is going to be here. But if you can inspire a buyer with a plan for how you want to take it forward, and actually how in partnership with that buyer, whether it's through investment funds or through access to their international network or through access to a wider range of services you can sell your clients, you're immediately starting to plant in their mind that 2 + 2 can equal 5, 6, 7 or 8, and that is when businesses are valued up here. So I think the simple answer is when you're looking at buying a business, or indeed when you're looking to position a business to sell it, it's what are you going to do for the next guy? What is the value add you're going to add to the next entity to create more value, not just for yourself, but for the person who's buying it.
Go to Hugh now. Hugh's co-founder of Meteorite, and in 2012 merged the business with MRM London. So a slightly different scenario where you sold your business but you merged it with another. So what's the thinking behind that?
Really follows on from Charles. We'd got to the stage where it was really hard to grow. We got to about 100 people, just shy of, and we were in technology and data. And unless you invest in that really hard, it's really hard to understand where you're going to get the next set of growth from. And you get your rate up to 100 people. We've been going for 12 years, so it's been sort of steady growth over those years, with the ups and downs that we all have. And we kind of sort of plateaued a bit, and it was, what do we need to do to get the next stage of growth? Do we go and get investment in to do it, or do we find someone we can partner with that's going to drive us to the next stage? And he's right, you've got to look to what you can do next, not sort of get to the point we're going to give up. And at that point, so MRM came along. It was heavy in technology and heavy in data, but not the front-end acquisition bit that we did. And we really hoped that actually, if we come together, Charles said, we get the two bits together, we can then really drive growth on from that. So ours was really, we got to a point on individuals, you can't go any further. It's very hard to get above that 200, 100 barrier. You oscillate around, and trying to jump the business forward is quite hard work. And after 12 years of it, we thought if we could partner with somebody else, that might help us go forward and grow together. But you've got to have a growth plan, because if you're not looking at a growth plan and you merge, my God, it's a miserable place to be. If you think a year or 2 years you don't grow and you've merged, that is horrific. So you've really got to look at what that can do to take the next stage. That's why we merged.
Thank you.
James, I needed the money. Pardon that.
Of course. James Kirkham, co-founder of Holler, and now has a very grand title, which I'm going to have to read out, which is Global Head of Social and Mobile at Leo Burnett Worldwide. So, and I understand you've sold the business twice, James. How does that come about?
Christ. The first one I'll probably try to forget about. The selling of the business twice came about because we found a suitor found us when we were starting an operation in Australia, probably about 7, 8, 9 years ago now, I can't quite remember. And they expressed interest, and we probably didn't really take it seriously at that time, frankly. And they kept expressing interest. And then we got to a point where we said, okay, well, how about this? And it just happened. It was, however, almost like a how-to guide of how not to sell a business into a completely shambolic kind of parent company. Their corporate governance was all over the shop. It virtually imploded, as you might have heard on many of these kind of instances. And we ended up buying it back off them. Then we sold properly a couple of years later to the Publicis Group as part of Leo Burnett. And to answer the question, I guess, I really echo, I think, something Charles was saying, that it's, to be honest, it was about progression. So once you get over the kind of the allure of some cold, hard cash and, life changes and stuff like that, you kind of get to the point, we were a digital, social, mobile, focused agency. We needed to progress and play on the biggest stages, having the biggest conversations with the biggest clients. And do you know what? When you're 35 people in East London, in Farringdon, and kind of, very hipster, very nice, but you're not going to have those biggest conversations on the global scale. So we needed to, I guess, consolidate in order to achieve that and achieve greater success, which I'm pleased to say has happened.
Very good, thank you. And lastly, my name is Steve Booth, who's founder of BLM, now chairman of Mike Colling & Co. Business acquired by Havas in 2008. Much the same question. Why sell the business?
Certain differences from some of the other guys, but some common themes there for sure. I've been running BLM for 15 years, and it had got as big as it possibly could under its own steam. So it was principally a media planning and buying business that it was bigger than any other private business at that point. And there's a question of not being able to get it any further in all probability. I'd enjoyed some considerable success, but there was partly a feeling that if we didn't do something, there's always a possibility you might screw it up. So that's something true. Maybe no one else would admit it, but
true. That's true.
You do want to make sure at some point that you get out before it goes tits up. And the other point being, of course, that you don't necessarily put yourself up for sale, but the simple fact is if you are out there as being quite successful, and certainly in the media independent sector there aren't that many players, effectively people come knocking on the door, at which point it's a matter of sort of dissecting those offers. And I guess one other point would be different life stages of other people in the business. So with the business that was a bit more mature, we had a lot of hotshot young management coming up that we needed to give room to, and so to some extent we needed to define a plan that allowed some of the older guys to move out of the way, so a trade sale became almost inevitable.
So staying with you, Steve, then, so how does a media guy price his business? High. Yeah,
very high. Yes, there's bound to be a haggle, isn't there? So start high. Well, I guess I mean, there's always a tremendous haggle, and I guess the point is the business probably isn't worth what you think it's going to be. You might, or you might dream of what you think the value is. The reality is that the market will decide. Partly, certainly going to help a lot if you've got more than one person interested. That's for sure. There are ways to do it. You can, of course, if you want, elect a price that you'll sell for, and just say that's our number and work your way towards it. And if you can't get it, I guess you hang on and carry on until it's worth it. That's one way to do it. But the most obvious point is that the reality of the market prices your business based on pretty fundamental stuff, and you've got to deliver against that. But I guess you need to at least figure out to some extent what's enough. It's not a bad place to start from. Because like I say, you can always carry on assuming that there's not something wrong with it. If there's something wrong with it, you're going to get found out and you won't be able to sell it anyway.
And James, obviously pricing a business twice. What was is it more than cash? What did the
Yeah, right. You know, when you get down to selling a business, well, you employ the services of clever people like you guys too, and you speak an awful lot about multiples and ratios and numbers and stats and figures and data, and you get swamped in it. But it's an unbelievably emotional thing, right? It's your baby, probably. It's something you put your heart and soul into, as has already been expressed. And a really good piece of advice on that front actually was making sure the right price suits you emotionally, so that if you feel comfortable, for example, with the initial payout, or indeed what you might be able to achieve overall, then that's arguably the most important thing, because it's something that you're basically happy with and you feel kind of comfortable with. So there's no amount of kind of, adjusting sort of multiples can alter the fact that it has to be something that you like and are comfortable with.
Hugh, so in merging a business then, how do you price in the risk of merging with another business?
Yeah, that's hard. It's really tough, because your next payment after the first is going to be dependent on those two coming together and how you actually, and we were given some good advice about kind of forget the numbers, just concentrate on the culture, because if you get the culture wrong of bringing two organisations together, it is a disaster. You know, from day one, it took us 6 months for people to go into meetings and not go, "Hi, I'm Hugh, I'm from Meteorite." And after 6 months, they began to say, "Oh, hi, I'm from MRM Meteorite." But it just takes so much effort to get that culture right. But it's the thing to concentrate on. So how to price it? So I go back to the pricing. I think every agency and every market kind of gets a hotspot. And, social is having its time. I guess probably mobile will. And then there'll be a whole thing about tech and people who can build tech that people want to buy, and stuff like wearables. And those agencies will have their time. And it was kind of our time. Data was becoming important. Big data was becoming important. This is sort of 2 years ago. Our other colleagues of agencies, you'll know when that time is right, because your colleagues are selling all around you, and you're going, "Oh, what can I say?" They're having lots of these deals, and then your time comes. Don't miss it, because if you miss that wave, there isn't another one coming. There isn't another one coming. Believe me, there isn't another one coming, and you'll then have to reinvent yourself to go on to the next wave. And KitKat Nor had sold, Chemistry had sold, and we were kind of the last of the decent-sized independents left to sell. I think you bought Crayon, didn't you? All in that same kind of year. The 4 big independents left, all around about the same size, got sold, and IPG, in fairness, didn't try to buy us first. They tried to buy KitKat Nor first and didn't offer enough, so they went somewhere else. So they came to us, so we were on the back. Whoa! And these guys told us how much they tried to pay for KitKat Nor, so we doubled it a bit and said, as it didn't get us and we were last standing, let's go for that. And it was kind of almost as simple as that, which sounds really bizarre, but it was kind of at that hot moment in time. And how do you price it into a merger? Kind of make sure the amount you get out first is enough for you to feel emotionally comfortable with. Right. Don't necessarily rely on the second and third payments. They're hard to get and they're fun to get, and they're the extra bit on the top of it. But believe me, from the day that you sell, don't think that's it. You even work harder after the day you sold, the day before you sold. But do enjoy that day. Go have a bit of fun. Buy yourself something that sort of supports your lifestyle a bit and enjoy it. Brilliant. But that's our story.
So Charles, from the acquirer's point of view, how do you set the price?
Well, I think we've heard that certain categories, whether it's mobile or social at that moment in time, are enjoying a premium. But I think there are some even more fundamental things that are relevant to whatever part of the market you're in, and that is, the risk profile of a business. I mean, a business that has 40% of its revenues in one client is obviously a real issue. I mean, because if that, God forbid, something happened to that client, and even if what you're doing for that client is wonderful and the service is great, we all know clients change, regime change happens, and things can happen beyond your control. So those things are factors. So I mean, we would look at pie charts. We'd love to look at a pie chart to see what is the biggest exposure to any one client. We'd love to look at a pie chart to see what is the biggest exposure to any one person in the business. So if that person were to leave or go under a bus. So if I say this with greatest respect to some of my colleagues, I mean, but if you're starting a new agency and you want to sell it, don't put your name above the door. Create a brand like Holler or Karmarama, because there's actually immediately that creates the notion that there is something that transcends the individuals that go up and down in the elevators, to use an often used analogy. So I think that is a key thing, is that how and if you have decisions on how you develop that business, go towards broadening and diversifying the business rather than putting all your eggs in one basket. Because again, when you get to the spectrum of value, you may have the most wonderful technology that gets you up here, but if everything is dependent on a relationship with BT, the value comes back down here.
Thank you. Well, Andrew, I mean, is it gut price or is it fancy formulas?
I think there are lots of fancy formulas involved, but you know what? The truth is, the market decides what you're worth. If you've got something that's alluring, and as you said, if there's more than one person interested, then that obviously forces the price up. I think it is about timing and having your moment and making sure that you appreciate that moment when it comes along. But I think one of the key things is not getting too wrapped up in. Well, two things not to get wrapped up in. Number one is that we all have in our minds simple shorthands that make life easier for ourselves. And in this area, the shorthand we have in our minds is what's the multiple. And I think what I learned in our process with B&B was the multiple is a very, very important constituent part of a deal, but is only one part of the deal. And actually there are other things that can be around it that could either amplify that considerably or not. So in a way, the kind of fixation you come in with on multiple is important, but it's not the only thing to be to kind of consider. And I think the other crucial one is about the kind of jam tomorrow. So you've got to be happy with what you've got, what you're getting paid for that business at that time. Be optimistic, work hard, have the plan, make sure that you do carry on growing. But fundamentally, you can't count on that. Our deal was a great deal. It was a fantastic deal for the point of time we were at. It was a great deal for the growth that we achieved over the subsequent years. If I look back on the charts, though, that the business that we were advising our acquirers, Chale, showed us, that was kind of like private jet territory. It was like bonkers what they were kind of projecting was possible for this business, because it's looking at if we went into 8 markets and we did this and we were successful in 8 markets as we are in London and and frankly, fortunately, none of us took that remotely serious for a second. But it's an important kind of lesson, because it can be quite a seductive process. It's a seductive, the baby metaphor is right, but it's someone coming over and saying, God, your baby's gorgeous. And someone else comes over and says, oh my God, I've got to have your baby. And as it were. And no one's ever said that. Even my wife hasn't said that. But it's a really seductive process, and you've got to keep a level of sobriety, I guess, about it, and make sure that you keep yourself anchored and make sure that what's happening today works for you today, and have a look at the future, but don't rely on it.
Getting the time is right. So Charles, just in terms of when you did the the MBO, for example, did you have a time frame in mind? So, right, guys, we're going to put heads down for 2 years and then we're out, or did events sort of dictate the time frame?
I think you have to have a plan. I think what determines the outcome is the plan. And I think to say we've got 2 years, I mean that is just a really sort of destructive frame of mind. I mean, what you have to do is you have to get, say you're starting, you've got a business that's making 3 million of profit, you've got to get it to 6 million of profit in order to achieve the type of return. So you have a plan, you stay close to that plan, you've got to be able to evolve that plan. But ultimately, to get backing behind you and to get people excited in buying you, a plan not just to get you to where you want to be on that day one, but also how you're going to work with a vendor and a purchaser thereafter. Yeah.
Hugh, you mentioned something about a wave and the class of your class, as it were, all selling. Was that the driver, or was it just because it was a certain age you'd all got to, or some such thing like that?
Bit of both, really, and also, as I said, we got to where we were in growth, and I guess we were a bit lucky because they came talking to us, which is always nice because you're in a stronger position. But it was only because, as I said, we were almost the last man standing of four. So yes, it was very much for us. It was part of a wave, and you could see that people wanted data, but people aren't buying big data companies now. They're starting their own, or they're investing in, or they're going to direct data. So that was our chance. So yeah, it was a wave.
Andrew, when we first met, I seem to remember you were one of the few agencies who your fourth recruit was a very senior CFO. So was the ambition already there to build something of scale from day one?
Yeah, the ambition was always to build something of scale. It wasn't the ambition from day one. There wasn't to sell. I think that is that would be a kind of corrupting ambition. I think. Of course, it's there. Of course, you kind of think about it, but it wasn't our explicit plan. But our explicit plan was to make sure we got to a decent size, that we were managing a business that we could be proud of, and we did take a decision very early on to invest disproportionately in somebody who's very, very good at finance, and that definitely paid dividends for us.
Steve, did you get the timing right?
Oh, definitely.
He's immediate.
As I said before, we're lucky enough to get people approaching us. To think that the reality is, I think, as you said, you don't necessarily set out to sell. You've got to set out to actually have a great business. If you've got a great business, then inevitably you've got options. But within those options, without any doubt, there's a corporate event, and you have to prepare for that. You have to be prepared for that. Yeah. I guess is the point, because whether it's to sell, and it's interesting that always sounds a little bit pejorative, doesn't it? It's almost like, oh, you're selling. It almost sounds like, oh, you're selling out, and you're not selling out. At some point there has to be something that happens. It could be a merger, or you could take other things over. But so I think the timing ultimately picks you. Would be my thought, and you simply have to be ready for it whenever that happens. And preparedness is something you really you can't be too prepared. Is what I'd say. So, I mean, all credit to you. You actually had that firepower up there from day one. We probably worked out that we needed to get a little bit serious, or more serious about the business. About 3 years out before we ultimately sold it, and it probably was a 3-year plan just to get ready to sell before we even worked out what that would be and who we do it with. And of course, there is another point, which is we talk about what's the right deal. The right deal really is all wrapped up in choosing the right partner, because once you're in with them, and you're wholly reliant on them delivering the rest of it. Now, as we say, we can all kind of ignore that back end if you want and assume it might not happen, but far better to choose the right partner that makes it does happen with you.
Absolutely.
And James, for you, was finding the right people more important than the time frame? Because things happen quite quickly to some extent, didn't they?
Was finding the right people more important? Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. There was a brilliant piece of advice that I think informs the way you act in that period. Basically, don't be a dick about it, and don't be greedy, and don't be kind of spending your time kind of poring over each and every number and what you can get out of it. And I think by taking that very broad approach, then you can do things quite quickly, and you don't want to start. I guess causing problems. Frankly, that kind of advice also means that you'll be very simple. The kind of roughly the numbers. What's fair. I think fairness is a really important point actually, because a lot of people, and I've witnessed other businesses do it, they're kind of less fair, and they're trying to kind of claw everything they can get out of it, and it elongates the whole process, and the suitors end up becoming, frankly, a bit hacked off of the whole thing, and then it creates a bad feeling, and the whole thing's kind of ruined before it's even started. So it's absolutely vital, I think, that you approach it in that kind of manner, which is about fairness.
So before we open up for you guys to ask questions, so you've got a couple of minutes to think of the killer question, perhaps we could just go around and say, what was the one single piece of advice you would share with the audience today? So, Hugh, what's the biggest learning from what you've been through?
Biggest learning? Anybody got one they can go with immediately?
I'd say it's back to that one we said earlier. It's about being prepared. It's going to happen, and shaping the business for a sale is absolutely key. You're going to have to do it, so be ready. And the fact that you do need great advice on board as well. I'm sure you won't mind me saying, Charles.
It will have to.
It's whatever you think you know about selling businesses. You probably know about 1/10 of what you need to know on your own. So get good advice as early as possible. My one.
Charles, what's the...
Well, I'll just follow
nugget?
up that. Get good advice as early as possible. But what you mustn't just have any illusions about, you go into the process of selling a business, it is a monumental distraction. And I'm speaking to someone who's probably bought about 15, 17 businesses. I mean, every time I'm still acutely embarrassed at the intrusion we make into the businesses. The accountants swarm all over you, the lawyers swarm all over you. We even send you off to the doctor to have embarrassing inspections, so you're not going to make sure you're not going to die. Although we wouldn't use your advisors like SEI.
We can't do that.
No, but seriously, have some really good advice, not just to prepare you for the business, but also to see you through the process. Because so often businesses get damaged by the distraction people go through, having gone through one of these things.
Andrew?
Yeah, building on that really, I think be clear about what the work is. What is your work? Your work remains what your work was before anybody knocked on your door or before you began to sell the business. It's about your clients, it's about your creative work, it's about your reputation. And again, the seduction is that this starts to feel like the work. This starts to feel like the important bit, and it's not. It is, but it's not. And that's why having great advisors is particularly important, because they can do an awful lot of that much better than you ever could anyway, but it also means you keep your eye on the important thing.
Hugh?
I've got mine now. It's not very good, but it's pertinent to me. And I think it was. I'll talk about mergers because that's my speciality. It's the rationale of the merger. If there's not a rationale, because in actual fact, it's not. The sale is important, but actually, what happens next? What's going to happen over the next week, the next fortnight, the next month? If the rationale can't be delivered to your staff, i.e., we're coming together because. If it can't be delivered to your clients, we're coming together because. And if it can't be delivered to intermediaries in the marketing industry, we're coming together because. And if it looks a bit false or a little bit made up or a little bit cobbled together or not quite right, it will fail. And if it fails, the disaster that comes is ghastly after that. And you can see, you know the history of a lot of them that failed. And most mergers do fail. There's a lovely quote which kind of is quite kind of fair. If the two coming together is like being airlifted from the Titanic by the Hindenburg, don't fucking do it. Do not do it. I think that's mine. Have a rationale for it, and realise that the day after you sell, have a bit of rest, but for a day. But the second day is almost harder than the day was before you sold in terms of what happens next.
Very true.
But it's fun.
James?
It's fun.
Yeah, can't help but echo the excellent advice piece. But I guess examples of where that's excellent, you'll get lots of tips and tricks and tactics that if you're as ignorant as I was, that you simply would never have come across. So the kind of advice you receive might be about things like, making sure in a period just before you're absolutely at your peak that you do sell, because obviously over the next, for example, 3 years, you're going to be achieving growth and you'll get the best kind of rewards from that. Or, I mentioned generosity, but that's about generosity with your team. If you've got brilliant people around you, then get them on board for the sale on whatever scheme, an EMI scheme, a bonus scheme, whatever that might be. Put them in that boat with you and get them on that journey, because if you just suddenly keep it to maybe yourself or the co-founders or whoever those kind of 2 or 3 are, then the thing becomes far too insular and you're not sharing that ambition and that drive that you all need. So it's bits of kind of advice that are thrown in like that are so incredibly important that you simply wouldn't have known previously.
Great, thanks, gents. So questions, some ground rules. You have to wait for the mic, who you are, where you're from, and then the question.
Martin Logue from Propeller. We're a PR company. We work with media and technology businesses. Certainly aware of the idea of getting a moment, because I'm acutely aware that a lot of our clients have got a bigger moment than we have. I was speaking to one of my clients in mobile, and he said, Martin, this business will be a lot bigger and profitable business next year. It's actually worth more this year because of the demand in the mobile space. But I'd particularly like to ask about the optimum number of partners, shareholding partners in the business as you build it up to sell. So each begins funding, Booth making 3 and 3. Is it the power of 3, or is that neutral, or is there any particular comment on how many we should do?
Shall I go first?
Yeah,
go for it. 3 is a good number, because the day that Booth Lockett and Macon started, we always agreed that 2 boats would carry the day, and the other one would go along irregardless of whether we liked it or not. And I then worked out how to get someone on side and made all the decisions. That's right.
I'm inclined to agree with that. We've just installed a new management team in Holland, the UK, and it's made up of 3 people, because the 3 we had previously, you have to make decisions at such tremendous rate, as you know, to run a successful business, and so that is a brilliant way of making decisions.
Charles, there's a risk in the sense if you had one shareholder.
Of course.
Yeah.
But I don't think there is an answer to that question, really. It depends on, obviously, if it's a one-man band, again, your value probably comes down to here. But, when I sold Financial Dynamics, we had 60. But then it was a very different size, 60 partners out of 700. So, so how do you, but I think the key is you've got to have a functional management team. You have functions within the business, and, a buyer has got to be able to see that all of those are being properly stewarded and managed. And so you need as many as you need to run your business. But if it's just you've probably already discounted your business, just for succession reasons.
Steve?
We had two. It's great because you make more money when you split. We had a financial director and we had creative directors and all the rest. So there was the two of us own the business, and we set it up together. And me and my partner Debbie, and we were close. But when we sold, we said, right, Debbie, you will run the business, and Hugh, you will go and do the deal. Because if you both try and do it, you'll take, as you said, you take the eye off the business completely. And we didn't need the financial stuff because Tristan is absolutely brilliant, and he was fantastic to hold our hand all the way through, and he'll do the financial stuff for you. You don't have to worry about the financial side. You actually have to run about all the stuff that these guys are talking about around the deal, and that's what I did with their advice. And you do need advice because you can't do it yourself. There's stuff that you don't know. And Debbie continued to run the business and hardly got involved in the deal. And for about 4 months, Tristan, I wasn't really involved in running the business, was I really at all? It was more just get the deal, sort the deal out. And that's how we split it. And it worked well. You don't need to, Tristan. You already did, my friend. Thank you very much. You already did. Many times over.
Just very briefly, I think just allow yourself a second every now and again to look at your business like you would if you were acquiring it. So if there were too many partners, that might look like a bit of a bugger's muddle and might be really complicated. If there were too few, then it might have an element of risk to it. And I think it's probably, 60 people's a lot. But as long as that's organised in such a way that makes it easy for someone to acquire, then I think that's the key
Right.
thing.
Thank you. Question at the back, Kathleen, I think. Wait for the mic, and then we'll go to the back again, if that's okay.
Hello, it's Kathleen from the Lighthouse. I know most of you, which is nice. Quick question about talent, because I'm a headhunter. Just wondering, at what point one of you or the trio, or whoever they may be in the partnership, decide they want to exit the plan, whether it's before the end of the earn-out or indeed at the end? How do you figure out who's allowed to leave and when?
Well, that's going to have to go to Andrew, really, isn't
it? So I very recently sold my shares in B&B before the end of the earn-out to my other partners. The reason why I did that was really what we both wanted, what we all wanted from our next phase of work was slightly different. And it's difficult, actually. I think if you can avoid being in that position, because then you're ending up not negotiating with someone who's acquiring your business externally, you end up negotiating for someone to acquire your business who were hitherto your partners. So I would say it's all worked out great, but if you can avoid that and have a kind of more common path and be more clear about that, then all the better.
Steve, you are 3 very strong characters and a bunch of people snapping at your heels.
Well, that was partly the reason for there needed to be an event in order to satisfy everybody. Partly we had one a guy called Nick Lockett who was a little bit older, and he very generously actually waited until the day we'd actually done the deal, and said, look, I'd really like to go now, today, but I'll stay and do whatever you want me to do. And of course we said, no, that's okay, you can go if you want to. So of course, he had the benefit of not having to do the earn-out, which is good enough for him, but he was generous enough to make a small consideration for being allowed to go. So that's one way to do it. But the important thing was he did want, you do need to let people go. That's part of the reason for a corporate event sometimes, and that can create room for the next level of talent to come through. I think to your question, Kathleen, it's we had a fantastic. We almost had too much talent in the agency, and the corporate event allowed it to bubble up to the surface.
I think it's a bit like writing a will, right? You know you've got to do it, but you kind of avoid it until you sort of need to. And when you're in an earn-out, you are completely gunning for the earn-out and the work and being the best and, making work that counts and therefore making money, and nothing else really distracts. However, I think when you end that and you're all going on to kind of what's next, there's definitely a little punctuation point where you should be able to have a very comfortable grown-up conversation going, well done, chaps, or, whoever, that was good news, but should all be now allowed to do what we think is best for each of us, and that just has to be quite a grown-up, comfortable conversation.
Honesty being key. Let's go to the back, if I may.
My name is Alfonso Sanz. I'm the founding partner of a performance marketing agency operating in Spain and South America. I apologize for my Spanish accent. My question would be if you think the answer of this question it might be different depending on the market. Is that clear?
Depending on the market, you mean the country?
The country, yes.
Okay.
The US and the UK are maybe more advanced.
Anyone feel they're qualified to go outside of the UK?
Yeah, really.
Go on, Charles. Probably has more experience.
What about different valuations?
Yeah, just how culturally, whether it's.
I think every market is very different. Certainly. I've bought businesses in the States. And what we find, the processes tend to be perhaps a lot more challenging. I mean, someone said to me that when you're dealing in Europe, you usually start with quite difficult conversations, but when you get close to closing, everyone pulls together and it all sort of gets over the line. Whereas in the States, everyone's incredibly enthusiastic on day one, and the further you get to the closing line, the more difficult it becomes. So, I also spent several years ago. I spent 9 months trying to complete an acquisition in China. And still sort of trying to complete it. It's culturally, everything is very different. But I think advice is another key part of it. I mean, using advisors who have local knowledge is just critical. And I think also having people on your own team who who have real empathy and understanding of those markets is also absolutely critical.
Steve.
When BLM was sold, it was sold to Habas, which interestingly was French. But all the management the management of the business that we sold to was actually all in Spain, so that was a right cultural mélange, you might say, and without any doubt, although all incredibly professional. I mean, Spanish business people are some of the most professional I've ever met anywhere in the world. All the guys in media in Spain are actually all ex-bankers. They don't know jack shit about media, but they're great at doing deals. So that was absolutely fine. And again, that's the great benefit of having good advice is when the deals look like they're going to fall apart, that's when the advisors come into their own and just tell you that actually that's all part of the cut and thrust of deal making, and they keep it on track and make sure it happens.
A question here. We're going to make this a bit snappier because I've got this horrible thing flashing at me nearly already. So.
Clive Michelle on the Pulse Group. Are some of you being quite polite about being entrepreneurs ostensibly and then moving into large groups where there's a group culture and therefore there could be a clashes of culture between entrepreneurialism and the way in which the large holding companies operate?
I'll go to Hugh and James, if that's okay, because you're both in corporate.
It's a bit painful. Yeah, I don't lie about it. One minute you're running your own business, doing what the hell you like, and then the next minute somebody says, "Oh, are you sure you want to do that?" So it is a bit painful. However, there are actually in IPG a load of ex-entrepreneurs wanting to still be kind of entrepreneurs. So you have to kind of find the ones that you can work with, find them and find ways to make a decision. We're pretty much left alone, which is quite nice. IPG is quite good at doing that, thank goodness. If we weren't, I think I would find it even worse. Does it stop you doing other things and being an entrepreneur in other ways? No. So you have to find your entrepreneurial outlets in other things, that invest in other things, enjoy life a bit, meet some other people, work around the edge a bit, and they don't stop you doing that. But actually on day-to-day culture, yeah, you do feel a bit like you've lost a bit of your soul.
James?
Quite polite, yeah. Well, there's this common misnomer, you've sold out, as though it's easy, it's the easy option, where it's, let's be honest, it's the opposite. It's pretty easy running your own business because you're running it yourself and what you say goes. So as soon as that alters, then that's a much bolder, more brave decision, actually, I think, that you can ever actually take. However, within those confines and parameters, you start to find that there are similar like-minded spirits, and it's a certain entrepreneurialism we're still going to drive through a behemoth like the advertising vehicle I'm a part of. You still need an entrepreneurial attitude to make stuff count there. So, the other final point there is actually the parameters of the deal you've done. So we sort of, through this advice, chose a deal which allowed us almost complete autonomy, certainly for the first couple of years, from the ad agency who bought us. Whereas the other kind of 3 or 4 on the table were very much a very different kind of ball game, very much mergers and stuff like that. So you kind of get to choose the direction you can go there.
But don't forget there are other alternatives to the big network groups. I mean, all the businesses I've sold have been to private equity or venture funds, where you actually find intelligent people who are entrepreneurs themselves, who are enthused by putting money into your business, and B, helping you build it. So there are many other alternatives in the network groups.
Thank you. We're out of time, I'm afraid, so apologies if we didn't get to you. All I'd like to do is thank my 5 eminent entrepreneurs for taking the questions from me and from you guys. Thank you very much.